My fiancé whispered, "I still love my ex." 2 weeks before our 180-guest wedding, I said, "Then go be with him." I quietly canceled everything, sold the house, and requested a transfer out of state. She thought it was a bluff until the moving trucks showed up. The emotional truth of it is much messier. I'm Blake, 30, 3 years old, a regional sales manager for industrial equipment here in Dallas. I've built this life on stability. My job demands focus, but it pays well enough that stress about the mortgage was never a thing. I valued safety, security, and a plan. Maybe I valued them too much. Kennedy, my fiancée, was 30. She was an interior designer, specializing in making spaces feel expensive and emotionally balanced. She had a strong Instagram presence and a genuine talent for making the difference between eggshell and ivory feel like a profound, artistic distinction. We'd been together for 2.5 years. The first year was the typical rush: dates, art galleries, Rangers games, and mutual friends' approval. The second year we bought the house. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch in Richardson. Exactly the suburb we agreed was perfect for the future kids we talked about. I didn't care much about the aesthetics, just that she was happy. She spent 8 months designing the kitchen. Subway tile was debated for weeks, and the quartz countertops were a non-negotiable status symbol for her. The kitchen became the centerpiece of our commitment, a monument to the future she was building. The wedding was actual days away when everything imploded. We had been engaged for 18 months, following her Pinterest board blueprint to the letter. The barn-style venue outside Dallas, the dusty blue and sage green color scheme, the herb-crusted chicken that cost a fortune. It was all locked in. 180 guests were confirmed. Her side alone was huge, reflecting her extensive social circle and large family. My suit was tailored, her dress was altered, and the honeymoon flights to Cabo were paid for. The final meeting with Riley, our hyper-organized wedding planner, was scheduled for Thursday night. We sat at the dining room table, surrounded by binders and clipboards. Riley ran through the checklist: ceremony start time at 5 o'clock. Signature drinks confirmed. Sparklers send off at 10:30. Everything was flawless, perfect down to the lint roller count for the gift table. But Kennedy was unusually quiet. She kept checking her phone, her attention repeatedly drawn away from Riley's checklist. She barely asked any questions about the vendor arrival times. I assumed she was just overwhelmed, stressed by the sheer scale of the event and the endless calls from her mother criticizing the flower seasonality or the font on the invitations. Riley left around 11 o'clock. Kennedy and I were in the kitchen, the beautiful 8-month designed kitchen, making a list of last-minute target runs on a magnetic notepad stuck to the refrigerator. Batteries for the sparklers, backup makeup, special tape. The ordinary tasks of a life about to be sealed. Then she started crying. It wasn't the cute, teary-eyed emotion you see at a proposal. This was full-on, ugly sobbing, shoulders shaking, face blotchy, black mascara streaks running down her cheeks. I immediately dropped my pen, moving to comfort her, thinking it must be another fight with her mother. She looked at me, her eyes raw, and said 2 words that felt like a physical blow. Blake texted me. Blake, her college boyfriend from Texas Tech 6 years ago. The one she thought was the one. They had talked about marriage, careers, and a shared future until he took a corporate finance job in Chicago. The long-distance relationship failed slowly, then all at once. She'd mentioned him, maybe 5 times total in our entire relationship. Always with a careful sadness that hinted at deep, unresolved hurt. I had always dismissed him as ancient history, the one who got away, a ghost that no longer mattered. I had always dismissed him as ancient history, a ghost that no longer mattered. I stood there, trying to process why his name provoked this devastating breakdown, fighting the urge to spiral into insecurity. Then she continued, filling in the blanks. Blake was divorced, his marriage ending 6 months ago. He was moving back to Dallas next month, taking a position downtown. He reached out to see her when he returned. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to hold on to the last shred of composure, clinging to the belief that this was just pre-wedding jitters. Lots of people get nervous before a wedding. It means nothing. It's normal. But then, she completely destroyed my entire world. Looking at me with tears streaming down her face, and twisting the engagement ring around her finger, she said the words that erased 2.5 years of commitment. Blake, I can't marry you on Saturday. I'm still in love with him. Just like that. 8 days before we were supposed to stand in front of 180 people. After buying the house, after designing her dream kitchen down to the matte, black cabinet hardware, after building a life based on the promise of forever. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Time stretched and compressed in the quiet space of that beautiful, useless kitchen. She was still crying, apologizing, claiming she didn't know the feelings were still there, that she had buried them and built our life on top. But the contact with Blake, even just the texts, had made them erupt like a dormant volcano. When I finally found my voice, I asked the only question left. Are you calling off the wedding? She hesitated, looked down, and delivered the true gut punch. I don't know. I need time to figure out what I want. Can we postpone? Just a few months. Give me space to sort through my feelings. Time to figure out what she wanted. Time to put me on hold while she explored her feelings for another man. Something shifted in me right then, a cold, absolute certainty about the only possible course of action. I told her she had 24 hours to decide. Either she married me on Saturday, or I would handle the rest. No postponing. No figuring things out. I told her she had 24 hours to decide. No postponing. No figuring things out. No figuring things out. No keeping me on the back burner. The weight that ultimatum hung heavy in the air of the kitchen, surrounded by the granite and the subway tile she had so painstakingly chosen. Kennedy immediately grew angry, shifting from panicked grief to sharp defensiveness. She accused me of being cruel, of giving her an ultimatum during the most difficult moment of her life. She insisted she needed more than 1 day for such a huge decision, claiming I wasn't giving her space to process her emotions. Her words hit me, but they didn't penetrate the cold certainty that had settled in my core. I looked at standing there, twisting the $12,000 engagement ring, a ring she had spent months picking out, and calmly told her that her refusal to choose was her answer. I couldn't bear another second in that house, in that dream kitchen that suddenly felt like a perfectly designed mausoleum for our future. I walked away from her tears and retreated to the guest room. Lying on the guest room bed, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling fan, I didn't feel rage or sadness immediately. I felt this strange, surgical clarity. This is the thing nobody tells you about moments of absolute devastation. The clutter clears. All those tiny anxieties, all the little things I had dismissed as paranoia, they snapped into a perfect, undeniable picture. The recent distraction, the constant checking of her phone that I told myself was just work. The sudden, strange urge to postpone our Cabo honeymoon by a week. Slept. which she had blamed on an urgent client project. The quiet distance she had maintained for the last few days. I had rationalized it all as pre-wedding stress, as the usual chaos that comes before a big life event. It wasn't stress. It was emotional triage. She wasn't stressed about choosing the right flowers. She was in emotional crisis over another man and hadn't possessed the courage to tell me. Until she was trapped by the timeline of the wedding. Sleep was impossible. I lay there for hours, running through 2.5 years of memories, subjecting them to this new, brutal light. Was I just the comfortable plan? Was I simply the safe, stable guy who showed up and didn't leave? A necessary step after Blake broke her heart 6 years ago. Slept the fear, while there had been a settlement, a placeholder until the main event decided to return. Was more painful than the initial shock of her confession. I remembered my father's quiet, broken lesson on commitment: never build a life on top of someone else's uncertainty. Friday morning came. The light in the guest room was thin and cold. Kennedy emerged from the master bedroom, her face pale and her eyes swollen, but still resolute in her indecision. She was still thinking about it, still wanting more time, still hoping for a reprieve from the reality she had created. The 24 hours were up. The clarity I'd gained overnight hardened into resolve. I got out of bed, picked up my phone, and started making calls. There was no point in waiting for her to choose me out of panic, guilt, or fear of the social fallout. If she truly loved me, the choice would have been instantaneous, an instinctive defense of our commitment. The fact that she needed time to weigh me against a ghost from the past was the answer itself. I was not the prize. I was the comfort zone she hoped to keep as a retreat. I wouldn't allow it. The time for discussion was over. It was time for execution. Friday morning arrived, and Kennedy still hadn't made her decision. The 24-hour ultimatum had expired, and I was done waiting for a verdict on my worth. It was time for the nuclear option. I called Riley, our wedding planner, first. Her headset voice was cheerful and professional until I cut her off. I told her the wedding was canceled, permanently. She tried to pivot, suggesting cold feet, suggesting a rescheduling. I shut that down immediately. It's not cold feet, Riley, I said, my voice flat. It's my fiancée telling me she's in love with someone else. That's the truth, and I'm honoring it. I instructed her to cover all vendor cancellations and confirmed we would eat whatever deposits we lost. Riley, to her credit, simply said she'd handle the 180 guest notifications and asked if I was sure. I told her I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I spent the next 2 hours systematically dismantling the financial architecture of our committed life. I called the barn venue outside Dallas. Canceled. Yes. We were eating the $8,000 deposit. No, we were not rescheduling or transferring the date. I called the caterer. Canceled. Losing another $3,500. The money was a painful abstract, but the cost of staying was infinitely higher. The photographer was surprisingly empathetic. She offered to refund half her deposit, since she might be able to book someone else with 2 weeks' notice. I told her to keep it all. She had already done our engagement shoot and put in hours of work. I canceled the band, the florist, and the transportation company we had hired for the wedding party. I called the hotel where we'd blocked rooms for out-of-town guests and terminated the reservation. Finally, I canceled the all-inclusive resort in Cabo, though I barely registered the financial loss. The honeymoon was gone, along with a good chunk of money, but it meant nothing now. Riley was tasked with sending out the official cancellation notice through our wedding website. We kept it vague, sterile. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding of Kennedy Williams and Blake Crawford scheduled for Saturday, December 16th, has been canceled. We appreciate your understanding during this difficult time. The goal was maximum damage control with minimum explanation. Next, the future needed rerouting. I called my boss, a man who had known me for 8 years, who understood my professional consistency. I gave him the basic, brutal version. My fiancée chose her ex 2 weeks before the wedding. I requested an immediate transfer to our Denver office. He was quiet for a long minute. Then, without hesitation, he promised to fast-track the transfer. He said the Denver regional manager was looking for someone solid, and he would have something concrete for me by Tuesday. It was a lifeline thrown from 2,000 miles away. The house had to go. I called our realtor. She tried to suggest we wait for spring, suggesting the market would be better. I told her I needed it listed immediately, professionally photographed, staged, and sold as fast as possible. The house was a cage now, and I needed out. The last call was to my parents. My mom immediately started crying when she heard the news. My dad, however, remained silent for a long time. When he spoke, there was no surprise, no lecture. Slept. He simply said he would drive down this weekend with his trailer to help me pack, and that I could stay with them in Houston if needed. Crucially, he said, he was proud of me for not staying in a situation where I wasn't valued. His own painful history with commitment issues in our extended family meant he knew exactly the kind of emotional quicksand I had just avoided. His approval, his understanding of the cold courage it took to walk away, was more valuable than all the lost deposits combined. By noon Friday, the systematic demolition was complete. I was operating purely on execution and detachment, and every canceled contract felt like a tiny, necessary amputation. The old life was dying, and the new one, however terrifyingly unknown, was waiting 2 states away. The methodical destruction of our life ended, and the physical act of moving began. I drove to Home Depot and spent $200 on packing supplies, returning to the house armed with boxes and tape. I started with my office, pulling diplomas off the walls and boxing up the books I had accumulated during my career. The garage gym I had spent 2 years building. The squat rack, the weights, the bench press, was being dismantled, piece by metallic piece, ready for transport. Every action was focused, deliberate, allowing no room for grief. Kennedy came home around 1 o'clock that afternoon. She pulled her car into the driveway, sat there for a long moment, and then walked inside. She stopped dead in the entryway when she saw the stacks of boxes, the half-dismantled furniture, and the sheer physical reality of my absence being prepared. She completely lost it. She didn't cry this time. She started screaming. She accused me of overreacting, of being cruel and vindictive, of destroying everything without giving her the space she needed to process her feelings. The noise of her panic bounced off the walls of the home she had so carefully curated. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage in the argument. I just kept packing my weights into a plastic tub. I told her, very calmly, that I was giving her exactly what she had asked for. Time to figure out what you want, just not with me as an option anymore. She shifted her tactic, the rage melting into desperation. She claimed she never said she didn't love me, that we could work through this, that I was throwing away 2.5 years over one moment of confusion. She tried to frame her confession as simple cold feet, as wedding jitters. I stopped packing, placing my hands on the edge of a box, and looked directly at her. This isn't confusion, I stated. This is clarity. You looked me in the eye 2 weeks before our wedding and told me you are still in love with another man. That is not a moment of panic. That is the truth finally coming out. I drove the final nail into the coffin of the relationship, delivering the core boundary. I am not interested in being her backup plan, while she decides between me and the great lost love of her life. I won't postpone our wedding so she can explore her feelings for Blake. I refuse to spend years wondering if she's actually happy with me or just settling. She tried one last time, tears returning, softer this time, perhaps more calculated. She said Blake reaching out had just confused her, that she was scared of the commitment, scared of making the wrong choice. She just needed reassurance that we were making the right decision together. I posed the ultimate test, the unanswerable question that sealed my departure. If Blake showed up right now and said he wanted you back, wanted to give your relationship another shot, what would you do? She couldn't answer. She just stood there, twisting the engagement ring, her eyes looking anywhere but at mine. The silence was absolute. That was all the answer I needed. I finished loading my truck, walked into the backyard, and grabbed Cooper, my golden retriever. He jumped eagerly into the passenger seat of my truck, his bed and food bowls tossed in the back. I drove away from the house, leaving Kennedy standing alone in the driveway, the architect of her own solitude. I headed straight to Garrett's place. My best man was in town for the wedding that wouldn't happen, and he took one look at me and Cooper, standing on his doorstep, and simply said, "You can stay as long as you need." He set me up in his guest room, ordered pizza, and didn't ask a single question about the details. The quiet, non-judgmental support of my friend was the first balm applied to the raw wound of betrayal. The physical and emotional separation was complete. I spent Friday night and Saturday morning at Garrett's place, the silence broken only by Cooper's soft snores. By Sunday, the realtor called. 3 showings were scheduled for the Dallas house, and 2 offers had already come in. The sale was moving as fast as my transfer. Apparently, Kennedy's 8 months of interior design work made the place highly desirable to buyers. The irony was a cold, sharp thing. By Tuesday, I had secured a short-term lease on an apartment in a Denver neighborhood called Lodo Corner. Unit on the 5th floor, mountain views from the balcony. It was the complete opposite of Dallas suburbia, walkable, dense, and with a raw, new energy. I was on a plane that evening, with Cooper nestled at my feet and 2 suitcases holding the sum total of my immediate existence. I was here. I was gone. Saturday, December 16th, was the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. I spent it hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. My body was still tuned to sea level, and the altitude absolutely destroyed me. At 12,000 feet, my lungs felt like they were going to explode, and every step was a deliberate, agonizing effort. Cooper, however, was in heaven, bounding through the snow. I kept pushing, driven by the need for a physical challenge that could match the emotional one I had just survived. I felt the physical agony acutely, a raw, burning distraction that was somehow cleaner than the pain of betrayal. I finally reached a ridgeline, collapsing onto a sun-warmed rock. I looked out over the endless sweep of the mountains, jagged, indifferent, massive, and standing up there, breathing the thin, cold air. I felt more peace than I had in months, more clarity than I had possessed in years. Looking down on the tiny world below, I felt the full, cold weight of the decisive action I had taken just days before. My fiancée whispered, "I still love my ex." 2 weeks before our 180-guest wedding. I said, then go be with him. I quietly canceled everything, sold the house, and requested a transfer out of state. She thought it was a bluff until the moving trucks showed up. The phrase resonated in the cold air, not as a point of bitterness, but as a statement of fact. That action, taken with such cold certainty, was the key to this moment of profound freedom. Everything that mattered, the job, the house, the city, was disposable if it meant retaining my self-respect. All my worries, all the past conflicts, looked tiny, distant, and insignificant from this altitude. I had successfully replaced emotional catastrophe with physical exhaustion and a mountain view. It was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The old life had been shed, and the immense clarity of the high-altitude air was flooding my mind. Life settled quickly into a temporary routine in Denver. I was living out of 2 suitcases, in an extended stay hotel with Cooper, but the quiet of the mountain air and the efficiency of the Denver office were already a balm. I was focused on work and on finding a permanent place to land. News traveled slowly, but it always arrives. Garrett, my best man back in Dallas, became my primary source of intel, a reluctant, loyal war correspondent sending updates from the ruins of my former life. The reports he forwarded were not about me, but about Kennedy and the consequences of her choice. The grand romantic gesture, the reunion with her great lost love. The entire reason she blew up our wedding. It lasted exactly 72 hours. 2 days after our scheduled wedding day, Kennedy went out with the ex, Blake. A fancy dinner downtown. The kind of expensive steakhouse she loved, complete with $8 steaks and a sommelier. She even posted about it on Instagram. Garrett noted some shallow caption about trusting your heart and right person, right time. It was the performance of destiny for an audience that had no idea about the chaos she had unleashed. The next day, Wednesday, they spent the day together. More Instagram posts followed, a visit to the Dallas Arboretum, a callback to their college days. It was meticulous, documented proof that the fantasy was real, that fate had reunited them. It was romantic, it was meant to be, and it was entirely fleeting. Thursday morning, the fantasy collapsed. Blake told Kennedy he wasn't actually ready for a serious relationship yet. I read Garrett's text message twice, blinking slowly. The guy she had chosen over me, the guy she had thrown away her entire life for, had decided 3 days later that he wasn't ready. He claimed he was still processing his divorce, that he needed 6 months of space to figure himself out, and maybe they could revisit things later. He had whispered promises of a second chance, only to retreat the second the stakes became real. He just wanted to see if the spark was still there. Kennedy called me Friday night. I looked at the screen, saw her number. She was using a new one, since I had her original blocked. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, 7 minutes and 22 seconds long, according to the timestamp, which I deleted without listening. Then came 15 frantic text messages, one after the other, all variations on the same theme, crying, apologizing, claiming she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She realized she had destroyed our relationship for nothing, for a man who didn't actually want her. I felt a quiet sense of vindication, but not joy. It was the confirmation of my cold clarity. I was not angry, I was just right. The next morning, Saturday, was the week anniversary of our non-wedding. She called me 14 times and sent over 30 text messages. Then, she showed up at Garrett's house at 9 o'clock, still in her pajamas, eyes swollen from crying. Garrett told her I was gone, that I was in Colorado. She broke down on his doorstep, begging him to pass on a message. He closed the door, texted me what happened, and waited. She sent me one last, lengthy text message that afternoon. She admitted she knew I hated her, and that she didn't deserve another chance. But she insisted that we had something real, and she threw it away for a fantasy, for someone who rejected her. She promised she would do anything to fix it. Anything to get me back. I opened the text thread, typed a short message, and sent it. You made your choice. I made mine. Good luck with everything. Then, I blocked her number. I blocked her on Instagram, on Facebook, and every other platform I could think of. The severing was now total and absolute. I chose self-respect, and the consequence was silence. 3 months passed since the implosion, and the immediate crisis had subsided into sustained success. The new routine was a stark, invigorating contrast to my old life. I was killing it here in Denver. The smaller office meant more visibility, and I closed 3 major deals last month, big contracts that made my sales numbers for the entire quarter. My boss pulled me aside last Tuesday. They were fast-tracking me for regional vice president. That position came with a 40% raise and oversight of the entire Colorado, Wyoming territory. At 33, I was about to become one of the youngest regional VPs in company history. The promotion was scheduled to go through the following month. The stability I once craved in a relationship, I was now earning in my career, on my own terms. The Dallas house closed 6 weeks ago. It was a clean break. I used the equity to put down 30% on a place in Golden, a town about 20 minutes west of Denver. It's a 3-bedroom house with mountain views from the back deck, and it backs up onto a system of hiking trails. Cooper loves it. We go hiking every morning before work, and I've been spending every weekend on the trails. I even tackled my first 14er last month, a mountain over 14,000 feet. I thought I was going to pass out around 13,000 feet, but I made it to the summit. Standing up there, everything, my worries, my past, felt small and irrelevant. I also joined a climbing gym in January. I'm surprisingly decent at bouldering. There's a quiet satisfaction in analyzing a problem on the wall and solving it with controlled execution. I've made new friends there. People who know nothing about my past, who just know me as the guy who shows up 3 times a week and tries hard. Meanwhile, Kennedy's consequences were starting to compound. Garrett, still receiving information through mutual friends, reported she had moved back in with her parents. Her interior design business was struggling. Turns out, when you blow up a high-profile wedding 2 weeks before the date, social circles take sides, and clients, especially high-end renovation clients, don't want a designer whose personal life is synonymous with non-commitment. She was apparently working part-time at a furniture store and taking medication for depression. I didn't take pleasure in her struggles, but I didn't feel guilty either. She made a choice, and choices have consequences. The irony peaked when my old company in Dallas tried to get me back. My former boss called with a senior position offer and a $25,000 signing bonus. The position was at the same level Kennedy had always been angling for, but never quite reached. I told them thanks, but no thanks. Denver was home now. I wasn't going backward. Word of the job offer somehow made it back to Kennedy through the office grapevine. She texted me from a new number, since I had her original blocked. The text simply read, "See, they want you back. Dallas wants you back. I want you back. You belong here. Come home." I didn't respond. But if I had, I would have told her that belonging somewhere isn't about people wanting you back after you've already left. It's about people appreciating you enough that you never want to leave in the first place. She definitely didn't appreciate me when she had me. Now, she was living with the consequences of that reality. 6 months have passed since I canceled my wedding, sold my house, and drove away from Texas. 6 months of breathing the thin, cold air of Colorado. The short version remains the same: life is incredible, with zero regrets. I am now officially the regional vice president for the Colorado-Wyoming territory, making almost double what I was earning in Dallas. The house in Golden feels like home. I paid off my Jeep and added a mountain bike and a full ski setup to my collection. I just returned from a week-long ski trip to Breckenridge. Turns out, I'm decent at skiing. Who knew? My physical health is better. I've lost 20 pounds, and I can now run at altitude without feeling like my chest is collapsing. My bank account is healthier. My entire outlook on life is better. I wake up excited about my day, instead of dreading the subtle, emotional labor of maintaining a life with someone who wasn't fully present. The emotional journey, the internal conflict, has finally reached a satisfying conclusion. The most important transformation wasn't the job title or the mountain views. It was the mindset shift that came from taking decisive action when my boundaries were crossed. 6 months ago, I was a man who believed compromise was always the mature response, that walking away made you a quitter. I thought you had to fight relentlessly for a relationship, proving your worth through persistence and patience. I realize now that was complete garbage. Sometimes, the most mature, courageous thing you can do is recognize when someone has shown you who they are and believe them. The first time. Kennedy showed me that, when she had to choose between stability and excitement, she chose excitement. That isn't love, that's convenience with a backup plan. That is keeping someone around until something better or more exciting comes along. For those who still ask, here are the final updates on Kennedy. She is still living with her parents in Dallas. Her interior design business is gone. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, she is working full-time at that furniture store now and still taking medication. She is not in a relationship. And the ex-Blake, he did move to Denver, like the rumors suggested, but they never reconnected after his 3-day retreat. He is dating someone else now, someone in her 20s. The cycle continues, and he is her problem no longer. Do I feel bad about how things turned out for her? Not really. She made a choice, a very clear, deliberate choice to blow up our relationship 2 weeks before our wedding. She gets to live with that. I made my choice, too, to respect myself enough to walk away. And I am living with those consequences very happily, grateful for the clarity that came at such a painful cost. The wound has healed, leaving only the scar tissue of self-respect.